Welcome to Frickety Frack. We do talk back. Thank you for joining me this episode. I'm Freck. My name is Patrick. Frickety Frack, We Do Talk Back is a show where I discuss different aspects of fandom and connect them to the gospel. So we are currently working through The Mandalorian, Season 1, episode by episode, and connecting to different lessons of the Bible in each episode. So I'm going to be working up through Season 1, and hopefully I think I'm going to be done with Season 1 by the time Season 3 comes out. And so I'll switch to Season 3 when it comes out and go episode through episode that way. And so I'm really excited about going on that journey with everyone, and it'll be a really great time to experience Mandalorian Season 3 with all of you. The name of the show came from my dad, who dubbed my brother and me Frick and Frack since we were kids. So we're going to be going over the episode The Child. So this is episode 2 of The Mandalorian, and in the very beginning of the episode, we get Mando going through a desert canyon, and where he is ambushed by a group of Transition warriors. And in this, the Mando takes care of all of them, has a pretty easy time with most of them. He does get a little bit injured, but nothing too bad. It's a great action sequence, very enjoyable to watch. And we get some more close-up shots of the child, of Baby Yoda. And so it's always great to see those clear pictures and getting an even better look at him during this time. And so after the fight, I really love the fight. It's got some great choreography with different kinds of weapons being seen. If you were familiar with Return of the Jedi, you might see the Gamorrean guards in Jabba's palace, and they are holding what are referred to as vibro axes. But we don't really see any particular action or how they operate or what they can do because it just wasn't necessary to the story. And so in this, we really kind of get the idea of what a vibro axe does and what vibro weapons really kind of look like and how they operate. And so we get that great action sequence and the Mandalorian, holding his own against a group of Transitions. Really, when you know Star Wars lore, you know actually just how great of fighters the Transitions are. And so that proves also just how good Mando is. One of the other things that I love about this episode is that we get some significant cuteness from the child. And in this episode, we see him walk over to Mando a couple of times, and the first time he reaches for his arm, and Mando senses that he's trying to touch him, and so he puts him back, and he has to do it twice. And then when Mando gets back to his ship and realizes that the Jawas have taken off with just about every piece of equipment or part to it, he goes to Queel for help. And there we get to see him eat a frog. And it is, I'm not a big fan of eating frogs, but the way the child does it, absolutely adorable. And so it's always great to see those fun things. And we get to see also some pictures of Mando and the child that have been used for a very long time, building up memes and jokes throughout the internet. So a lot of that happened in this episode. And the other thing that this confirms, I talked about this when my brother and I did Obi-Wan. Jawas are the worst. And this is where it really started. Like the Jawas weren't that great to begin with, especially, when you watch Star Wars A New Hope. But between this episode and then Obi-Wan's interactions with them in his show, Jawas are just the worst. Like, his ship was there and they, pillaged it for parts. And then on top of it, when he goes back to get them, he has to do a job for them to get those parts back that they stole from him. Now, they're scavengers. That's a part of their species, the way they operate and how they function. So, it's fine. It's but it's Star Wars, and you just kind of have to accept it, and it's fine. No big deal. But anyways, it's just of course, what I did love when Mando and Queel are on their way and approaching the Jawas. He's like, they don't like you very much. He's like, well, I did disintegrate a few of them, and that just kind of made me chuckle, and I love that. This is also the first time that we hear Mando refer to his weapons as part of his religion, and so it was one of those things where when I first watched this episode the very first time, I was kind of like, it's kind of an interesting thing to say, but knowing Mandalorians and what they think of their armor and their weapons, and them being a form of special commando, it makes sense. It's not that big a deal, but anyway, but it was funny to see see him interact with the Jawas, and and once again, Jawas are just the worst. And speaking of Queel and his help with the Mando, Queel once again is the center of my biblical theme this week. And so for this week, I found 1 John chapter 3, verse 17 through 18. But if anyone has the world's goods and sees his brother in need, yet closes his heart against him, how does God's love abide in him? Little children, let us not love in word or talk, but in deed and truth. So Queel, as I said, is an interesting person in this episode because he has not actually received any payment from Mando for the work that he's done, except for that first blurg from the very first episode. And only one of them, because the other one went to Mando. He only wanted one. And so, he helped negotiate with the Jawas. He helped and did a ton of work on Mando's ship, and did all of that because, and what I loved is that he said, well, you were my guest. I was honor bound to help you. And so it's one of those great things. And Queel even mentions that, he worked his entire life to be out of servitude, because Mando offers him a job and says, it'd be great to have you on my crew, just, helping maintain the ship, maintaining the equipment, all that stuff that, he probably doesn't want to have to do himself, or especially beyond his limits. But anyway, Queel's like, I worked my entire life for this peace. And so one of the things that he says is that I'm grateful because you brought peace to my valley. And so in this, I thought about we as Christians and how we are called to love one another. Jesus, in fact, mentions this as part of his grace, as part of the greatest commandment. The first is we're supposed to love God with all of our heart, soul, mind, and strength. And then the second part of that commandment is to love our neighbors as ourselves. And so now I know everyone is different. That's fine. But we are called to love them. We're called to love our neighbors as we love ourselves. And most people care about themselves to a certain extent, but we're also called to love our neighbors as ourselves, and that's much more than just blanket, oh yeah, sure, I love you, and pat them on the head and then send them on the way. No, we're supposed to open ourselves to each other and love as Christ loved us. And that's how we know what love is. And it's one of the things I love about the John letters, is that one of the things that he writes about is that we know what love is because Christ loves us. And so that same love is the love that we're supposed to share with one another. And so I want to encourage you this week that if there is a way for you to open your heart to your neighbors in a new way, please do so. Look at what Queel does for Mando. Help in not expecting anything in return. Help in a way that you are able to do so freely, and knowing that it is going to bring peace to that person that you are helping. So I want to encourage you in that time to do that. All right, so let's rate this episode. Now, this episode is great. It is, I want to say, it's just slightly a little bit less than perfection. because, and I hate to knock it just because the first episode is just so perfect. And so I'm going to give this episode a 4.5. And the only reason why I'm really kind of knocking it is because of the rebuilding the ship montage. Now, you might be thinking, well, why knock for the building montage? It's like, well, in my opinion, it was probably slightly a little bit longer than it needed to be. And then on top of it, I'm not necessarily sure if it could have been skipped all entirely, or at least made just a frame or two of rebuilding the ship. Now, there are some purists out there who probably like, oh, you didn't show enough. But for me, it just kind of slows things down, in my opinion. Building montages are great when you're watching shows like Phineas and Ferb and things like that. But in shows like The Mandalorian, I know they're doing a lot of hard work. I understand that. I just didn't really need to see it. So anyway, so like I said, I'm going to give this episode a 4.5. It's great. The actions is awesome. I mean, you just can't go wrong with this episode. I mean, well, you can, but you just can't go wrong with this show. All right. So if you disagree with me on the rating that I gave this episode, or any questions about the biblical lesson that I had, feel free to email me at frickityfracktalkback@gmail.com, or reach out to me on Twitter at frickityf, or at frickityfrack on Instagram and Facebook. Please rate, review, and subscribe. If you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comment section below in the YouTube video. If you have a podcast, please sure to reach out to me that way. So remember that I love you. Most importantly, God loves you, and this is the way.